Welcome, everybody, to the VVBGA UVM Extension webinar series, number 2 in our series, focusing on cool tools that farmers have invented or utilized on their farms. And you can see that we'll be having several more exciting webinars coming up in the next month. And these will be sent out in the newsletter as well. So with that, we'll take it away with our first presenter. It's going to be John Cohen from Deep Meadow Farm, talking about his potato beetle beater. Take it away, John.
As a result of, I think many of us have had problems with the decline of trying to deal with our potato beetle problems. We were seeing an 80% reduction in yields, and just finding that there was very little we were finding effective that was working for us, either spraying. And we were trying two different things. We were trying later, and we were trying other different types of sprays. So nothing was really working for us. And then in 2022, we started to demo different things of ways of removing potato beetles, essentially starting with two young kids going out there with brooms and seeing if that made any difference. And we did notice a little bit of difference. At this point, we were watching herds of beetles walking across 50 acres, and you could walk anywhere on the farm and they would eat just about anything. So we started to look at different models out there for removing beetles. We had seen some stuff out of Canada with they were using vacuums, and then some big units that out there in California were being used, so, more similar to this type of setup. Chris, thank you very much for kind of steering us in some direction with some motors and stuff like that. So what you're looking at here essentially is we're straddling a single row of potatoes. The unit in the center has two motors that are set, and we'll see in the video, they move in reverse direction. It is hitting the beetle of the plants and knocking essentially everything on those plants off, hitting against the sides, and everything's dropping into those catch containers at the bottom. This is our first prototype. We have modified it a little bit. When we walk the rows after using this, we're getting about a 95% recovery of beetle and larvae that are on the plants. It was so significant that we had from a yield ratio, our yields went up above anything we'd ever seen. But the other thing, we also changed our planting dates. We used to do mid to late April. We went to a mid to late June to try to miss some of the windows for some of the instars of the beetles. So everything is adjustable here. The center motor is adjustable. The trays on the bottom can move up and down and can move in and out as the canopy spreads a little bit. The motors are electric. Everything's running off 12 volt. We originally had it so we could adjust the speed. We found that the highest speed of the RPMs of this motor were the most efficient. We also tried different material for the where you see these plastic pieces hanging down, and we found that anything stiffer was taking too much off the plants. Anything that was looser was not hitting the plants enough, and you'll see it's a little bit sloppy, but it actually works really well. So I think the next video should be, what do you got next? The catching in the bottom? Yeah. So this essentially is just going down basically one half a row, and that's approximately the plant material. A lot of potato beetles and larvae. It does catch ladybugs. I don't know that we're going to be able to do anything about that. That's probably our biggest downfall to this, because when we're getting to the end of the row, we're sliding this tray out and we are dumping it into a immediate kill solution. We'll just leave it at that as an organic farm. But it's pretty simple. You can run, I think I ran about 4 acres in about 3 hours or so. And again, all single row. At that point of the season, that was what the volume we were seeing of bugs, and that's probably a excuse me, a higher volume. We only ran it, so this past year was the year we used it most effectively. We ran it twice. That was the first pass. The second pass, it was worth running, but there was minimal. I think about 10 to 20% of what you're seeing here. The other thing is that we were curious about whether we were knocking beetles onto the ground So we did quite a bit of walking behind to see were things just falling through the plants in the center and we were missing things. We couldn't find anything, maybe one or two. So I don't know if that's a accurate reading, but it worked. So the next video, this is what it looks like sort of in motion. And there you go. And I'm not the videographer, so that's what it is. And that's it. It's just smacking the plants around, knocking it around. We found that most of the beetles were higher up and probably the upper 50% of the canopy. So we, have raised everything up to make sure we were catching everything. We haven't modified a whole lot on this, except that the metal plates on the outside are now stiff. And we changed where the catch trays sit so that they were sliding out. You can see we have a piece of tape holding them in. Now they actually sit in there all by themselves. So for a first year using them, it was an amazing game changer. We didn't spray anything. We didn't spray for leafhopper. I don't know if it removed leafhopper. I didn't see it. I think we really dealt with the leafhopper more by changing our planting dates to later in June. But we saw, and we don't know because this was a strange season. So we're not sure about the leafhopper, whether we'll go back to alternating with pyganic again or not. But there was no entrust sprayed. We have zero effect with efficiency with entrust. It does nothing anymore. And that's what we got.
Great, thanks, John. And we have time for a few questions. We'll keep things moving because we've got a lot of speakers. But quickly, what was a rough estimate of cost to build it? And are you going to be posting the plans anywhere for others to use?
Well, are we going to fabricate them or are we going to post the plans? we haven't decided yet. We're talking about fabricating it and selling it. I think that's the direction we're probably going to go in. We've had a lot. We've had already 7 people interested in buying one. And the cost to us, I think, the first year it's hard to know because we made a lot of modifications. But I think with labor and materials, we ran about $1,800.
All right. Well, I wouldn't have asked for proprietary information if I'd known you're going
That's
commercial.
fine. I mean, listen, people can look at it and they can modify their own from that design right there. But we're looking at whether we're going to actually fabricate them or not.
How many times did you have to go out and use it?
One time was probably almost enough. What we got the second time was about 20% of what we got the first pass. So that was 10 days later. So one time was rather efficient.
Nice.
And folks can feel free to put questions in the chat and we'll read them out for you if that works, or just raise your hand or interject.
I'll just say it was
Any
a lot
other
cheaper
questions?
than doing entrust.
And I'd be curious in the chat if folks want to chime in, whether entrust has become non-effective for other potato growers as well. I've heard it anecdotally. And of course, we can take questions at the end too for everybody as time permits. Casey, I see you've made it to the webinar. Great. Would you like to go next?
Sure.
Casey Steinberg from Old Friends Farm, Amherst, Mass. Welcome.
Thanks. How's this looking here? What do you all see?
If you put it into the slide mode without the side shots, there you go.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, we're seeing
My jerry-rigged thing.
the picture clearly. Yep.
Okay, so I'm just gonna blow through a bunch of these because there's maybe 8 or 9 just little. I don't know if they're innovations. Some of them are innovations. Most of them are just tools that have helped us a lot. This one is just a kind of jerry-rigged rack for jang wheels, and I guess the couple key things I'll say about this is use wing nuts because it's easier. Make sure the posts are vertical because otherwise the wing nuts back out and you lose them. And have an extra post because you always need a empty parking spot. And this is just stuff you can get at your hardware store. How do you advance slides here? That's the question. There we go. If you're using bulk fertilizer sacks, we used to just take buckets and unload the fertilizer from the bulk fertilizer sacks into our drop spreader, and this thing makes that a whole lot easier, where you just use your forks, drop the bag on top of this thing, and all of a sudden you have a valve. And the only caveat I'll say about this is just be really, really sure that your boom is solid and you're resting on something, because you are operating underneath the heavy thing. But in terms of, it's a little less dust and it's way easier on your body. And I'm happy to answer questions about any of this stuff after. We have a monitor system for our whole farm: temperature, humidity for all the houses, temperature for the coolers. But this one is one that you might not automatically go for, but I think it's worth it. And it's a door open close sensor. So basically, if you have a cooler door that distributors access a lot when you're not around, such as we do, it's really nice to know whether they have closed your cooler door before they leave. So this will tell you whether your door is closed or not. And so this is part of a whole component of systems. You need a gateway and you need a monthly plan to run this thing. Gas-powered post driver. If you're pounding posts, this thing is amazing. It's a little heavy, but it does the job really fast, and it's definitely a body saver. You know, it's not cheap, but neither is a trip to the emergency room when someone smashes their nose, or yeah, this just makes life a whole lot easier. All right, this is a silly one, but we finally sprung for it. It's a shade umbrella for your tractors, and we've got a couple of cultivating tractors that they're just out there all the time. There's no roof on the roll bar, and it's just one of those things that we decided was worth the quality of life for whoever is driving. You can change the angle completely. You could take it down if you're going through a tunnel, but it really made life a whole lot easier for your tractor operator. So this picture is actually trying to show not the cultivator itself, but the cart it's on. This thing is wicked heavy and goes underneath the underbelly of a couple of our cultivating tractors. And as you know, if you have one of those, dragging those things in and out from underneath your tractors is just a bear, and usually you don't have anyone to do it, and often you're on grass or dirt. And so we just put some plywood down on the dirt floor and built this little wheelie cart, which has very little height itself, some heavy casters underneath. And so one person can just roll it under, lower your lift arms, and bolt it on and go. And so we have that for basket weeder, tines, spider weeder. Little mini electric hot water heater for a hand washing sink in the wash house. It's pretty instantaneous. The heater itself is only a few $100. The sink is probably a couple $100, and then the plumbing. But for washing requirements, pretty nice. Oh, what it doesn't show here is we've set it up so there's a foot pedal to turn on and off the water. So it's a hands-free system for sanitation in your wash house. What am I showing here? Oh yeah, the magnetic tray happens to be a great thing to hold your seating notes, your nuts and bolts, your whatever you don't want to lose. But it's a nice way for me to keep my seating chart right in front of me, and any other giblets that I might want to keep track of. As long as they're not stainless, then you're out of luck. All right, here's a random one. If you have an aspect of your farm where you're shipping stuff, which we do, we're shipping value-added things. We acknowledge that we use a ton of plastic on the farm, and we were just trying to chip away at little 1% ways that we can use less plastic. And this machine uses a water-activated tape to seal your boxes, and it's pretty fun to use. You can measure out what lengths you want. It's faster than a tape gun. And yeah, doesn't smell like gross roll of tape. I think that's all I got.
That was a lot of great information. Thanks.
Zoom.
Take a pause for folks to pipe up with any follow-up. How wind stable are those umbrellas? If you have to take them down if it's windy, or are they pretty strong on the tractor?
They are untested for us. We've only had it a season, and I don't know. It's sturdier than it looks, but I think I'm guessing you probably wouldn't want to use it in more than 20 miles an hour. Something like that. It is fast to take down.
We have one of those on an old tractor, and it's been on there as long as I can remember. We have a bungee cord around the front to kind of hold it down a little bit too. It's on a John Deere 720 we use for doing hay. So yeah, we're not out there if the super duper windy, but it seems to hold up just fine.
Yeah. The other thing is, so you can get the umbrella and the mount separately. And so for us, it's rare that both of our cultivating tractors, basically both tractors that don't have a canopy, would be operating all day at the same time. So you could, save a little bit by just buying 2 mounts and 1 umbrella. It's a pretty easy swap.
Implement mover. Can you elaborate? What kind of casters did you have underneath there?
They were something from the caster drawer.
Okay.
the random wheel bin in your garage.
They must be
they're,
pretty sizable and durable for the weight bearing.
they're undersized, but the thing is, to get anything that's really appropriate for that weight, you lose a lot of clearance. So we have elected for underbuilding in order to achieve the purpose. I'm sure there's some really low profile. I mean, I suppose you could just do rollers if you are always going straight forward and back. But these 4 wheels swivel independently. So when you get your implement under the tractor, you can move it in all directions. And if you just had rollers, it would be hard to get that forward and back movement.
Thanks again. I don't see any questions coming in the chat, so people can enter those later if things come to mind. And we'll move on to hear from Diane about her high tunnel prototypes, working with Jericho Settlers Farm. Thanks, Diane.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I know Chris is on the line too, so if people have questions for me or for Krista, this is a great time to ask them. But let me start running through. So this was a SARE partnership grant. We did this in collaboration with Jericho Settlers Farm. I run a small robotics company, Rigorous, and spent about a decade working on vegetable farms, including Mark and Krista's farm here. So we had already had a relationship. And we had an idea to basically prototype a high tunnel gantry system with 2 implements. And when we talked to Mark and Krista and said, hey, what's kind of the stickiest thing that you wish you could automate? They said row cover management, because it's done in the winter when their crew is a lot smaller. It doesn't take a super long time, but you have to do it twice a day. And so it really tethers them to the farm when there isn't a lot of staff there. And it's wet, it's cold, it's not the favorite thing to do first thing in the morning. So we looked into some different solutions to accomplish that and came up with this gantry concept. Some other objectives of the program, besides building it and evaluating it, was quantifying the labor savings to see, is it going to be worth it to people to build something like this? Is there an ROI? And then to publish the designs and let people know what we found out. So the first thing is, why a gantry? And by gantry, we just mean there are 2 rails overhead that can be connected by a toolbar. So when we start thinking about that as the foundation, there are a ton of different implements that can be attached to it. If we're looking down from above, you could have row cover management. You could have a weeder that goes up and down the toolbar and also up and down the high tunnel. You could do a cedar, you could do a boom watering system. You know, we felt like this was a framework where if we could show that it was effective, this wasn't the only tool that could leverage the infrastructure. We also saw, you know, I think that a lot of people need a path to automation. And so we wanted something where people could realize a benefit before making a major investment. And so that was where we said, all right, let's focus on one problem that's novel and hard, and one problem that uses the same infrastructure. And I'll say is easy because it's been done before. We didn't invent it. So the whole idea is to leverage infrastructure that's readily available on farms, which are the high tunnels, and then have a tool that you can leverage that infrastructure for multiple implements. So the first implement, the easy peasy one, is the transport cart. It's low cost, super low maintenance. You can pop these off onto different rails. So the more high tunnels that you have set up, the better ROI. You can utilize the carts and move them from house to house. It's really easy to source and implement. Everything that was used for this can be fabricated locally or purchased locally, no matter where you are in the country, and a quick ROI. And then the hard one is an automated row cover system. So this really hadn't been done before that we could see. It reduces the labor required to move it, and it could increase the management so we can maximize sunlight, heat, and ventilation. So theoretically, we could be able to test whether if you do more intense row cover management, you can grow better crops. And I will say that the whole concept for the high tunnel gantry was based off the Netherlands and their greenhouse automation systems. And our theory was, okay, if large scale greenhouses can use automation effectively, how can we scale that down for something that might be a better fit for regional farms in the Northeast? Rather than the large glass tunnels, we're looking at plastic tunnels. So I'm gonna kind of scoot through some of these. Always happy to loop around, but just for time, I'm gonna skip through some of the slides. So just to clarify, the rail system is just SS20 fence top rail. So something you can buy, it's pretty cheap, it's pretty easy to connect together, and it's very easy to hang from your high tunnel with a simple C bracket and a U bolt. So we did that. We connected 2 lines of rail down 2 sides of a 100-foot high tunnel, and found very quickly that your high tunnel has to be level for this to be effective. Otherwise, you really, you know, the airs, yes, we built in some braking system to it so that it won't move unless its motor is turned on. But for the transport cart, you can shoot that thing right down the other side of the high tunnel if it's on a pitch. And so again, the toolbar frame, this is meant to be kind of the generic 3-point hitch of the high tunnel gantry system. It connects the 2 top rails, and it allows, you know, these specific trolleys work with those C brackets so that they can pass through the brackets unobstructed. And so this is the framework that we wanted to use for both systems. The transport cart. Really quickly, we looked at what it was going to be transporting to make sure that we could fit enough of the right size boxes. And at the same time, you can't overload it because there are weight restrictions specifically on this attachment. So we wanted to make sure that we couldn't make it so large that you could put 500 pounds on it and then potentially have it break off. Development was really simple. We had this fabricated by a local shop that mostly does automotive fabrication. Got some simple plywood for the shelves. Everything else was kind of a bolt attachment, including hanging the rails. Labor study, I would say that if you're considering getting a hanging cart, it has a great return on investment. We ran a labor study with Jericho Settlers Farm. And at the end of the day, we're looking at harvesting an additional 22 pounds per hour of cherry tomatoes, getting through an additional 10 bed feet per hour, and a labor savings of $714 a month for the 2 rows that we were looking at. So theoretically, you could expect that, at least that, for every high tunnel that you produce tomatoes in. When you look at the cost of the system, including the top rail and everything that goes into supporting it, it's about $1,600. So this is looking at 1 cart and 1 house. It's assuming a 3-month harvest period. And so you're looking, if you have a 3-month harvest period, you're looking at a payback period of less than 1 year. And so at least in our work for automation, that's the best that you can expect. I realize this isn't automation, but it's certainly a very useful tool. I think this is a video, which is why. All right, so now getting into the automated row cover system. There was a lot to work out with this. I think that we came up against a lot of challenges that were just requirements that we hadn't unearthed before. We have self-aligning ball bearings on each of those rows because there is a bit of a sag in the pipe, but even with those, we found that it could not handle the 30-foot span. And so I'll just play this again while I'm chatting. And so we ended up building the center bracket and doing it in 2 sections. That had some issues, which I'll maybe just touch on now rather than later. But because this house had 5 beds, the left side was shorter than the right side, which can cause the motors to kind of get out of whack because they're spinning different amounts of row cover. It also leaves a bit of a gap in the middle, which I think with enough tuning could be relieved because it pulls it taut. But at the end of the day, I don't think a system can do the full 30-foot span. I think if you realistically wanted to have this be in production and you cared about having a nice tight row cover covering everything, you would actually need to run 2 systems in tandem, which would increase the cost and complexity significantly. But let's go back and just talk about what it is. So the frame attaches to that toolbar that I showed you, and then a roll of row cover is spooled with motors on either side and a gearbox and chain that drives it. The toolbar is attached by the same kind of roller hitches. I can't remember the word. They're trolleys. And we decided to build a motor system on top of it so that it drove the trolleys. And so a better view of it is right here. And so there is a rubber wheel that has traction with the pipe. The trolley itself also has kind of a V-shaped wheel on top of it that guides it and keeps it on top. And then this, simple chain and sprocket gear situation is what moves it forward. So we had some good luck getting this working. This was the original piece that we built, but we found some issues. One of those issues is that because this motor box is actually connected to the top rail, when this jostled from one pipe to the other, when it went over a connection, it would kind of shake a little bit. And because this is attached here, this chain would then come loose as that goes up and down. So we realized that the entire motor would have to be built into the assembly, which you see this quick change was done here. We just made that bracket super quick and attached it to try. And that let us know that we were on the right track. There are also, I'm looking at this, I'm seeing so many strange adjustments that we had to make. Like this is actually a little spring so that the same kind of motion could be absorbed. But at the end of the day, we realized that we needed to do a whole other round of revisions. So the 30-foot span was too long for the motors. The trolleys lose traction and can pop off the rail. And then the spooling motor was underpowered because of the sag. And let me just quickly explain this. So this pipe sags, and if you leave it overnight, it sets in whatever position it is, which means when you start it up the next morning, it has to go kind of up and around until it starts moving again. And so the more you use it, the more that sag is going to be in place, which is another reason why the 30 feet, I think, is just too long for these spooling motors. But we wanted to try and fix the problem with a gearbox to see if the structure itself could work. So we redesigned the trolley cars. We used the weight of the toolbar to increase friction. We created a much more complex assembly with multiple guide wheels. And honestly, it worked a lot better. You can see it here. This is us. We built it in our shop first and then reinstalled it at Jericho Settlers Farm. And I have another quick video that will show you, but overall it did solve a lot of the problems. I will say one other problem the initial design had, we tested it first in January and it was working really well. And then we came back in March to set it up after they had seeded the house, and the high tunnel was now 65, 70 degrees inside, and all the traction was gone. So we realized that we actually had the benefit of some of the traction of the really cold days that went away. And so that was another impetus for having additional roller wheels. We also rebuilt the drive assembly to allow a bit more variation in the angle and added a gearbox, which really solves that issue. Again, this is here in our shop before we installed it at Jericho. And then I think this was from one of the final days of testing. Obviously, there's a lot left to the imagination. You do have this middle strip. Our speeds have to be really slow to keep traction. So obviously it's not something you necessarily want to watch unroll for 15 minutes and then roll back the other way for 15 minutes, but we didn't think that was too big of an issue, honestly, because if someone was doing it automatically, they didn't have to stand there and watch it. So hopefully this wasn't too confusing, but just in terms of what we would do for further study, I really do believe that if people wanted this tool, they would need to hang 2 of them that each took about half of the house and were slightly staggered, which means you'd have to have a center rail as well as the 2 on the sides. We put in hangers every 8 feet, which is fine for the transport cart, but every 4 feet would be more helpful for the ARCS, which has more specific requirements. It needs to run at slow speeds, and honestly, build a different implement. We recently surveyed and spoke directly with a number of farmers in this program, and not very many of them actually felt like row cover management was a problem for them anymore. We heard a lot of people say that it used to be an issue and now they don't manage it as much, or they don't grow winter greens as much, or this, it just seemed to be something that people weren't focusing on. So I don't know that demand is going to warrant more iterations, but I do think that the framework of the high tunnel gantry could hit a variety of tools. So I know I'm at time. Sorry if I went a little long, so I'll stop there.
That was perfect timing. Thanks, Diane. A lot of great creative info there. Trevor had several comments. Trevor, do you just want to speak up?
Yeah, just a couple things on the greenhouse stuff with row cover management. We all think of it linearly, going the whole length of the tunnel, and everybody's using different sized hoops or different structures for winter growing. Some of the other structures I've seen across the world and other customers that we've worked with is going more width instead of lengthwise for winding up row cover and doing it sections. And I've seen a lot of nifty things done with garage door tracks, and you back all the spring tension off on the winder so you can wind it back and kind of like make a bow. But there's some things in the gantry, getting all the stuff out of the way. That's a great idea. But the only trouble is showing that row cover was flat. So how would you get the longer cover and to wind it up over hoops? Because that would be more of the common practice, but stuff that's there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say that considering hoops was one of the reasons why we decided to do an overhead gantry rather than something attached to the ground or in-ground tracks or sidewall tracks. But I do think it would add a much larger degree of complexity and challenge to the problem as well.
Excellent.
So do you have any perspective to add as the grower who hosted this experiment?
It was certainly fun to work out all the nuances. I mean, Diane's team was awesome in terms of there's just like so much that goes into the mechanics of it that you wouldn't even think of as a grower, you know, in terms of how to make it function. And so you know, I will push back a little bit, Diane, on that. I know like a lot of growers say like, oh, I'm not doing as many greens, or I don't cover as much. And I think we would grow better greens if we had automated covering, because it would just get done all the time. And it is something that we're lazy about in the winter. At least I am, because, you know, you want that mental break at times, and not, and, you know, if it was maybe the only thing I did on my farm, you know, growing winter greens, it would be more of a focus. But I think certain crops we can get away with a lot less covering than we used to do. But certain ones I think we would be more successful with if we had ways to automate it so the labor wasn't so intensive in the wintertime. But you know, that's a management choice and a market and business focused choice, really. But the you know, the way the costs were going for the system, it doesn't make sense. Like, you know, hiring a high schooler to cover and uncover your beds all winter maybe would be more cost effective if you could find someone who would show up. But you know, than building the mechanical tool at this point. But it was really fun to work out, and it did work pretty effectively in our system. I mean, we don't use hoops for most of our crops, but it did the job for sure.
Awesome.
Questions in
Yeah,
the
I do
chat?
think price is the biggest issue for this is, you know, I think all in it'll probably to do one, it'll cost just in materials around $5,000. So I do think you really want to know it works super effectively before you make that kind of investment.
Diane, there's a couple questions in the chat about the trolley and I think tomato harvest. Our friend Jacques from Quebec is asking about working high up in the plant. I think for harvesting, pruning, I'm not sure. You can pipe up, Jacques. And there's also a question about the trolley in multiple rows. How that would work.
So the trolley in multiple rows is you need a rail overhead. Typically it'll be between two beds. And so you can pop the cart off the rail. It's not even fully attached. It's basically two of those trolley, my hands are not actually helping in this communication, so I'll stop waving them in your faces. It's attached by those two trolleys with wheels. So by lifting it up and over, it will come off and you can place it on another rail. You would need a rail between two beds in every place that you'd want to use it. So I know Andy Jones, we've seen Andy Jones's system, and I can't remember, I think he might have 3 rails per high tunnel so that they can easily pop and get everything inside of it. And then in terms of the height, one of the things that Mark and Krista asked for that we didn't deliver, but I think is just a genius idea, was a ladder that could also be attached to the cart so that as you're harvesting, you're also sliding down a ladder, obviously with little brakes, so that's not going side to side as you're a person on it. And I think that that would be really effective and pretty easy to put together.
Thank you so much. Really
Thank
exciting
you.
to see these being developed. And all of these slides will be posted online for later viewing if there's some details you want to follow up with later. And now I think we'll move on. Trevor, I believe you have some tools that you'd like to show about rock diggers, etc.
I'll just run through this quick. Most of you know where we are. A lot of people haven't been down, though. I wanted to throw this slide in. We get a little confused when some people are picking up. In our address, this gets to the farm stand. But if you haven't come down to see the new 35,000 square foot warehouse and all the stuff that's in there, this is just a visual from Google Earth. So all this equipment, we get lots of questions about ways to build it. We can talk about it online, but sometimes it helps to come see these things. So what the big surge has been in the last couple of years is about these reverse tiller stone barriers and how useful they are as a 1-pass or a 2-pass tillage system on our farms. So what that is as a stone barrier, it's a reverse tiller. So if you're thinking of sitting on a tractor, a regular rototiller is lifting in the back, where a stone barrier is digging in the back. In that action where it rotates around like this versus around the back allows the soil to lift from the front of the machine and go through what we call leveling forks or blades. And that helps us pick a level in the soil when the machine's done traveling at where we can bury organic matter, living cover crops, stones, rocks, everything else. So it's really a 1-pass tillage tool. There's a couple of unique things in the last 2 years that have really happened with stone barriers as well. NRCS has qualified them as a STIR value in a pass of 15. So what that means is if you're doing any reduced till or no-till practices, plastic culture or bed prep, this tool, if you use it twice in a year and then either no-till drill or what they'd call lightly incorporate a cover crop, we can do all of that practice as a reduced till manner, and NRCS will cost share with you. There's about 5 specific sizes that fit our markets in the Northeast. The common is the G25 series, that's the smallest, all the way up to the G45 series, which is like a 200 horsepower tractor. They make them larger than that, but that's where they fit in our markets. This is just an example of what they can do. A lot of people tell me, hey, I've seen these videos online and I don't believe it to be true. Well, that upper picture in the left-hand corner burying a full radish cover crop like that, or as seen in some of our field days, 4-year-old strawberry fields, and the top 6 or 8 inches of that soil is completely weed-free, and all that other stuff is at a layer where you can compact and let it decompose and the plants can take advantage of it later, is amazing. But sometimes people get stuck on the name stone barrier thinking it's just for stones, but it's really the function of how that takes these clods or organic matters and buries them. Another neat, interesting point with these machines is if you're doing a lot of biodiversity with different cover crops and trying to build your soil health and organic matters, because it's only a 1-pass tillage machine, you're stirring up the soil there a little bit, but you're not really separating the clods or the clumps in there. You're still getting a good absorption and keeping the microbes happy because you're doing it in 1 pass instead of multiple passes, continually beating those up. And the bottom of the machine, which we'll talk about here in a second, the tines are C-shaped as opposed to L. So when you look at the plow pan on the bottom of the machine, it's got a zigzag shape because of that C-shaped tine, where an L-shaped tine, which you'd see in a typical rototiller, has a flat plow pan. So in challenging weather conditions, like with excessive rain that I think some of us might have seen this past year, that still gives you slots in which to allow infiltration of water to not give you a compacted layer through this tillage practice. This is the smaller common machine, the G25 series. They come in all different widths. This is good for 30 to 50 horsepower. And the question I get asked a lot is, well, how big of a stone or material can it bury? Well, it's a culmination of this measurement here and the distance between the tines. So it's really got about a 7 3/4 inch pass through that you can manage. What's unique about using a stone barrier, since it's a reverse tiller and going this direction, any rock or stone that it can't bury, it rolls forward with the machine, that it doesn't hop over. So when you pick the machine up, there's all your rocks right at the end of the field to pick up. It doesn't bury them all if it's too large to pass the machine. So it kind of aids you in rock picking for those of you that aren't growing on river bottom ground. The next series is the G35. This is the most common, which is the 55 to 115 horse machine. And it comes in 2 flavors, the standard, and then the HC stands for high clearance, where they literally add, double the clearance in between the top of the machine if you have high rocks or a lot of organic residue that you're trying to pass through it. So this is standard is 8 inches and the high clearance is around 16.5. This is just some sample pictures of what they look like. And everybody asks, well, what's the underneath of the machine look like? So this is a 2-year-old G25 series. I had someone drop off for me to change the tines. What's a unique characteristic of these machines being a reverse tiller is that the action of tillage, the tines are constantly sharpening themselves. You come with a square tine and it makes this little angled triangle as compared to wearing as a regular tillage. The G25 series, this is this vibrating selector rake. So this is about 3/4 of an inch between each tine. The larger series, the G35 and 45, you kind of got an angled spring tooth, much like a teeth on a tedder or hay rake. So it's got a little more momentum on it, but that's what the G25 looks like. And that's after 2 years. And the other unique feedback I get is that the bolt heads don't wear out like they do on a rototiller. People have been able to reuse the bolts just from the tillage action. Where a lot of people are also asking now too with labor and tillage, you can take these Farigo machines and make them virtually do anything other than just tillage. So as the stone barrier comes, we can also add a bed forming hood. We could put a hydraulic roller on the back if we wanted to firm up the edges of the bed that the machine's making to go through with the mechanical transplanter. We can add a plastic layer and drip tape applicator, a fertilizer hopper electrically. I have an organic grower in Massachusetts that puts all of their pro-grow and everything out through the field, right through the machine. But you can also add an APV seeder, which you can do your cover crops with, or put that same bar in the front and use that as a fertilizer applicator. There's different finishing baskets and wheels that you can apply as well. So where it comes to pictures of some of those machines, the larger photo here, that's at the start. It's in its third year now of a SARE research trial at Davidian Farm Market in Northborough, Massachusetts. They received one of these multi-machines through a SARE grant, and they're laying all of their plastic, other than their first plantings through the year, with bioplastic through living cover crops. And a couple of the things we've learned about going through different stages of living cover crops and one pass tillage with this machine is, if the cover crop is taller than 8 inches or is very biodiverse and thick, we want to add a flail mowing step to the front of that if it's taller than those conditions, to help break down the organic matter a little bit before it goes through the machine so it doesn't get bound up. And you want to do that 5 or 6 days ahead of time. But we're going to see a video of this working. There's some of their drawings, and then this is just another image of some people that use it differently for end of year field finish prepping, putting in bio and seeding cover crops at the same time, or for pasture renovation, they can do that and reseed crops as well. But when you get to that and you're looking what we're doing with plastic layers now, I just threw this slide in here. You know, we have to plow, harrow, and work all of our soils and beat them to death as compared to just going right through the living cover crop. And the other thing on the G35 and 45 models, we can pick with spacers on the machine how deep we bury that organic residue. On the G25, that's not an option. But why do we need to do more of this in tillage? Well, the weather events, that's about it. One thing I wanted to talk about that's different for folks too is you can do these multi-machines from Farigo. You could do just the stone barrier and then buy their innovative plastic layer compared to doing it in one pass, and people are doing that. So lots of us either have played with a rainflow machine or a Ketic, or we're dealing with an RB 448 here, and they all have different quirks one way or another. What the foreign folks have done from Italy with Farigo, they've become really innovative in adjustability of their equipment. So they call their plastic layer, which you can get, you know, individually or on the machine, the commodus. And what's unique about that is up here on the bedding machine, on the sides, you can adjust side angle. There's 2 centimeter holes in which you can adjust bed height width, and bed height is adjusted just with the top link to make it easy. And there's also inserts, so you can do 2 or 3 different beds at once. What's key is for people that do use plastic, or people that want to make beds and remove the plastic thing, their poly layer is removable with 2 pins. So if you're going in a high tunnel or just want to make some direct seeding beds, you can get all of this mess with the plastic layer and all that stuff off, 2 pins, and then when you want to lay plastic, back up to it, insert the 2 pins, and it's really easy. They also make it extremely adjustable just by quick change pins to change width of plastic. They put an integrated brake for road travel. I don't know how many of you have laid plastic and then go back to the barn and you have a trail leading behind you because you forgot to stop the plastic. I've done that multiple times. And a couple things that are really unique is the wheels and the coverers, whether they're plows or discs, we do both. Each of those move on independent axes. That's something that's unique that you don't see on any other plastic machine in the country. Rainflow introduced their row track thing to try to make the machine pivot or wiggle its way down the row because all of their wheels and covering discs in the back were on the same axis. They weren't allowed to move freely. This doesn't need that option because each of those move independently to follow the contour of the land as you're turning or laying plastic. Another unique feature is too, if any of you have laid plastic and had the plastic slide off of the wheel. Instead of having a roller, they have an angled guiding bar that the plastic rubs against. And because it's got this banana curve here on the end, it always allows the film to stretch out so it never pops off these wheels on the end, which is another key design feature. That just shows you where different countries are thinking differently than us, which is kind of unique. This is just, you can do one bed or two beds at a time. We've done that. But you know, this is the future. What everybody's looking at is a one-pass system, so we can still get the advantages of warming the soil early, but you know, leave those between row covers and row middles either growing with an existing cover crop or plant another one after that. We can also add dibbler wheels and stuff to the end to pre-punch plastic and things. I've only sold 2 machines like that, but I don't know if this video will work. If it won't, we'll show it after. It does. Now, in that video, you could see a couple spots where the machine was going over a large boulder. That was just the hydraulic roller type of machine. They have since added a bed former, which makes a taller raised bed. If you don't have the bed former, the max height you're going to achieve is a 3 or 4 inch tall bed. If you add the bed former, you can go up to 8 inches. One of the other unique things you see is you don't get that compaction from row to row. So the cover crop is almost even with the bed top. So that's why people have to change their systems, because you're not tilling the entire field. So that was a lot about stone barriers. The next feature that I want to talk about, this is new. This won the Innovation Award globally from Ferrigo for cedars in 2022. I've had 5 growers playing with this past year, 4 in the United States, 1 in Canada. A machine that Ferrigo developed is a precision planter through plastic machine called the Modula Go. So what that machine does is, we'll see a video of it working in a minute. There's multiple row units. They're only 9.5 inches wide. And these row units read off of a potentiometer sensor that's in the front of the row unit that travels down the raised bed. And you can plant in all these different seeding spaces. So we can go as far apart as 46 inches and as close as 6 inches. And this is very similar to a Matermac or a monosem planter, where they're using a vacuum, which we provide vacuum through hydraulic application, to have a smaller seeding disc that picks up and singulates the seed. You can drop 1 seed, 2 seeds, or 3 seeds per hole with these. But instead of everything being chain driven, the seeding plate and the seeding units, the spike wheels, if you will, are each independently electronically driven. So down here, there's this little box that you can plug in for your seed spacing and how many seeds you want per hole, and that electronically goes down. Now, this past year, we use this on all of our fall cucurbit little pumpkin-y stuff, all the weeby little, Jack-B little gourds, all those other things, dropping 2 seeds per hole at different spacings, 31 inches, 23 inches, and 15 inches. We did a lot of summer and zucchini with this. We also did a 2-row unit in seeded broccoli and cabbage with it. And if you know how small that seed is, the fact that this machine can precisely plant that through plastic at a minimum depth, they say, is about 5/8 of an inch when you incorporate that. When we did broccoli, we had 95% germination. Everything looked great. We did it the third week of June, and then it all flooded and died in August. So I can't tell you if it worked out better or not, but all the other pumpkins and everything else, it worked extremely well. As far as a cost point on this, each row unit is about $10,000, and the frame with the hydraulic driver is around $7,000. Depending how many you get, you can do this. I have a larger grower in Florida that's doing this with a 4-row machine just on summer and zucchini, and he spaces it out and does 1 row at a time, 4 beds, all in 1 pass. So that's another unique piece of equipment. I'm going to show that video in a second. Contact for that and for questions. The last thing,
just a heads up, we're just about out of time, so need to wrap it up.
I'll show that video and we'll go from there. Put that on the right screen. Wonder if you can see that.
Yes.
So that's 2 rows at a time on white bioplastic. You can see the fingers there on a not too fancy tractor. You just have to have power and 1 set of remotes to run this. And that's seed and broccoli. So you can, my video skills aren't as good as Andy's, but that plastic window there, that's the seeding window when you can run it. And that's going through on some existing bio. The unique thing about the seeder too is it has a manual calibration mode where you can leave it up on the 3-point hitch, put some catch trays underneath and simulate your run to make sure you get seed singulation. You can check through those windows and everything. So it's a huge labor saver. With a single row unit, we're doing 1.25 acres in an hour. So if you're doing that, it's pretty nice. And if you have good toolbars, you can do 1, 2, 3, or 4 rows. If you only got a 2, you could go down and turn around and come back in the same class, plant 4 rows, and control your spacing that way. So that's what I had for equipment. Maybe we'll do automation another day.
Great. Thanks so much. A lot of exciting new stuff coming out. And
Sure.
I know you're available for follow-up questions via email, and you've got this stuff in your catalog too, I'm sure.
Yep. And we'll see everybody up there on the 30th.
Yeah, looking forward to a great annual meeting. I know Andy had some slides too from one of your field days, Trevor. We'll add those to be posted along with all the other slideshows here and the YouTube recording for folks. And I want to thank everybody for coming out, and have a great afternoon. Stay warm.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Okay, we ran out of time and closed up the meeting. However, since I'm the one editing this recording, I thought I'd add in the last few slides, and those watching it after the fact get a little bit of bonus content. So what I wanted to do was just share a few slides from Brookdale Fruit Farm. I went down to their field day and got to check out some of this equipment in person, see it in action. Trevor is not lying. There's the equipment does what it says it's going to do. It's pretty slick, and I'm impressed by it. So I went down there. They had a field day in July. There's a whole bunch of farmers gathered. They did some on-field demos. They had all the equipment out to check out. And it is really nice to see equipment in person rather than just getting all googly-eyed over the sales brochure after the trade show is definitely gets you excited, but seeing it mid-season is also motivating and makes you want to spend a lot of money. I just want to reiterate the vacuum seeder here. Like I said, I haven't played with this, but I did see it in action and it looks pretty slick. I've definitely could see some advantages to a tool like this on our farm, whether it be, you know, pushing some of those longer season pumpkins earlier, maybe use even direct seeding some sweet corn for some real early stuff, or better weed control. I don't know. Something that's intrigues me, but I was impressed by this machine. I think it's pretty sweet. You can vacuum seed directly through plastic. Really well built. We've got a Forego flail mower, and I think this brand's got some real nice engineering behind it. So it'll be neat to see as more farms adopt this tool, how they like it, how it works on their farm, and just the way it changes up practices and makes things possible, opens up new opportunities. We did get to see the multi-tool in effect. So the stone barrier, fertilizer hopper, drip tape applicator, plastic mulch layer, all in one machine. The field day did emphasize that it does take a little bit of setting up, and it may cost you a row or two to try to get things all positioned and dialed in right where you want it to. But doing all of this in one pass is just such a huge labor saving time, tractor saving time. The windows of opportunity when the conditions are right is narrow. So I think, this tool will be a game changer for sure. Here's just, a couple of different close-up pictures. It's got some gathering wheels to kind of pull some of this edge soil in under the machine. There was a nice picture of the bed former roller he's got ahead of the plastic mulch layer on there. They also demoed some Ranieri rotary mowers specifically for orchard crops. You got to see it in action. They specifically have a center mounted gearbox and really low profile design to kind of get under the canopy of some large stuff and reach under branches. So that was kind of nice to see. They also demoed this kind of mega string trimmer. It's adjustable up, down, left, right, in, out, all of that to prune off suckers and the weeds in the understory of orchard crops for trellised apples like this. Pretty cool tool, and definitely helpful to see it in person. So that's something else I wanted to share. And then personally speaking, on our farm, we acquired a Forgo offset ditch bank flail mower. This thing is an 8-foot wide beast. It can go up, down, left, right to do ditch banks and roadsides, which has been phenomenal. We primarily use it for mulching our corn stalks and breaking down cover crops, which is mainly rye or Sudan grass. We like to use it for cleaning up the edges of hay fields because sometimes you don't like to stick the hay mower all the way out towards the edge. You don't, you kind of lose where the edge of the field is, and this allows you to reclaim some of that lost ground and just keep things tidy and weed free and whatnot, as well as trimming up of trails or driveways and just the edges of those things. It's a nice maintenance tool to have on the farm. That being said, it is one of our favorite tools. It's super satisfying. There's a big, mode of action that's happening there, but it is probably also one of the most dangerous. It is redonkulously heavy. It's heavy duty, which is great. It's going to be a real durable, long-lasting machine. I can tell it's definitely well built. It can shred small trees. It's got 2-inch wide blades, hammerhead blades, which can really chew down those saplings or the brambly stuff, which you just don't want to get into. And it doesn't just whack it down like a brush hog would, but it shreds it to a mulch, which helps stuff break down. So here we did 2-acre sorghum Sudan grass maize. So this was 8, 10, 12 feet tall Sudan grass. I did wait until after a frost, and that allowed the material to dry out. That wasn't necessarily intentional. It was just when we got to breaking it down before the first snowfall came and flattened it down. So I wanted it to stand up a little bit. So it's a slow process to incorporate that much biomass, but it turned it right into just like a nice mulched field. It was impressive. Sunflowers, corn stalks, Sudan grass, just poof to pulp like fresh bedding. It's very dangerous, throws projectiles near and far. We have shattered our back window of the tractor, unfortunately, which was a mess to clean up too. But that's part of the name of the game, I guess, when you've got a piece of equipment like this. We do have it on a 105 horse John Deere 6105 tractor. So we do typically use the 4-wheel drive. We keep the bucket loader on when we're using this just for counterbalancing weight. You can get away without it on a flat field, but turning and maneuvering with this thing up, hanging off the side can definitely get a little tippy and a little hairy, and you got to be a skilled and a trusted operator and just take your time and have patience. That's what I'd say to that. That wraps up. Well, before I do that slide, I just wanted to share one more thing. If you'd like to see some more photos of Brookdale Fruit Farm without visiting, you can do so, because I went and visited and share those photos. And a lot of those photos are shared on my podcast website. If you don't know, I have a podcast called The Farmer's Share. It's a behind the seeds podcast where we visit with farmers and learn what it takes to be a sustainable produce grower across people, profits, and our planet. And I interview farmers, young, old, near, far, mostly Northeast farmers, but happy to chat with anybody in the veg and berry space. Everybody's got a story to tell, and every episode is a little bit different. So one of these I visited with Hans and Chris as well, and we got to tour Trevor's new facility. We got to check out all sorts of the equipment, a lot of his inventory, see stuff in action. So if you want to see some of these extra photos, you can do so on the show notes of the Farmer's Share or listen to the episode on your favorite podcast app. There's a little plug for that. And then lastly, I just wanted to share, we do have more VVBGA webinars coming up. They're trickled out. I think there's 14 of them this season. So all the way through March, we'll have a whole bunch. And the next couple is sourcing and selling pollinator plants on the farm and in your nursery next week, January 24th. The 31st is human resources on the farm with Hans. February 7th, greenhouses part 1, so getting those started up for the season, and part 2 the following week on the Valentine's Day, growing bedding plants for early season sales. So thanks again for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed this bonus content in the recording, and hope to see you in the next webinar. Thanks.